You are sitting somewhere right now waiting for permission to leave, a clock on a wall, or a phone in your pocket telling you when you're allowed to stop. For 300,000 years, no human being on Earth ever experienced that. No bell, no clock, no one standing at the front of a room deciding when you were done learning for the day. And somehow, every generation before us still managed to pass down everything they knew. Languages, which plants would kill you and which ones wouldn't. How to track an animal across miles of open land, using nothing but a broken twig and a half print in the dirt. How to stay alive, with nothing written down anywhere and no building to hold any of it. So the question everyone asks is the wrong one. When were schools invented is easy. It's a date you can look up. The real question is harder. When did the first human look at what they knew and decide it was worth handing to someone else before they died? Go back far enough, and the answer isn't in a building or a written record at all. It's in a stone tool, passed from one set of hands to another, with no words involved. Stone tools recovered from sites across Africa, Europe, and Asia date back over 1.5 million years, and they share the same design, made the same way for hundreds of thousands of years in a row. That kind of precision doesn't survive by accident across that many generations. It survives because someone taught someone, who taught someone, who taught someone else. In an unbroken chain stretching back longer than written language has existed by a factor of a few hundred, hands of 15 to 50 people. No books, no archive. The only library was the oldest person still breathing. If a drought hit and you needed to know which plants wouldn't kill you, you found the person who survived the last one, and you asked them directly, because the knowledge had nowhere else to live. Around a fire, at night, 81% of conversation among one of the oldest continuous cultures on Earth, the Jew Huanzi of southern Africa, was storytelling, myths, ancestor tales, lessons wrapped inside a plot, so a child would remember it decades later, long after the person telling it was dead. A chimpanzee feeds itself within a few years of being weaned. You took 18. That gap is not a flaw in the design. It is the entire design. 18 years is the size of the window evolution, built specifically for one purpose: stuffing a developing brain with everything the last 100 generations had already figured out. So nobody has to start from zero. 100,000 years ago, someone at Blombos Cave in South Africa ground a piece of ochre down to powder, mixed it, and stored the result inside an abalone shell. Then they pierced a row of small shells and strung them together to wear. Multiple steps, multiple materials. None of it is instinct. Nothing in a human mind comes preloaded with grind this, mix it with that, store it here. Somebody had to work that out, and somebody had to teach it, and the chain holds all the way back to a person whose name will never exist in any record. That instinct to make something beautiful and pass the method along didn't fade. It got bolder. Walk into Chauvet Cave in France today, and you're looking at horses, lions, and rhinoceroses painted with depth and shading and anatomical accuracy so precise that the researchers who found the cave in 1994 had to rethink what they assumed about how early that level of skill could exist. Nobody opens with a masterpiece. Skill like that is built by watching, by failing, by being shown the right angle one more time, which means the knowledge was already living inside the group before it ever showed up on that wall. Then the ground itself changed what knowledge had to look like. 10,000 years ago, agriculture arrived, and survival stopped being something one mind could hold. A farmer needed to track seasons. A trader needed to count debts owed across dozens of people instead of a handful. A ruler needed a record that wouldn't die when he did. So humans did something new. They took knowledge out of a human skull entirely and pressed it into clay, where it could outlive whoever put it there. That clay became a classroom. 2500 BCE, Mesopotamia. The Sumerians called it the edubba, the house of tablets. Dig at Nippur, and you'll pull up tens of thousands of those tablets, and a striking number of them are homework. The same symbol, copied wrong, copied again, finally copied right, by a child who's been dead for 4,500 years, and whose handwriting still sits in a museum drawer somewhere. Students entered before age 10. 12 years later, they came out knowing cuneiform, math, law, and astronomy. This wasn't built to satisfy curiosity. The empire needed scribes the way an engine needs fuel, and a classroom was the fastest way to manufacture them. 399 BCE, Athens. Socrates is executed for asking questions in the street that made powerful people uncomfortable. He never wrote a single word down. His classroom was wherever two people were willing to argue honestly. Plato, watching his teacher die for the crime of asking questions, opens the academy in 387 BCE, open to anyone with a real desire to think. No entry fee beyond that. Aristotle walks through that door at 17, stays 20 years, and leaves to build the Lyceum, and somewhere in that process invents the underlying shape of almost every academic subject still taught on this planet today. 1088, Bologna, the first university that that has never once stopped operating since. Oxford a few years later, Paris not long after that. Then 1440, the printing press, and suddenly a book costs little enough that owning one no longer requires being born into a crown or a monastery. Ideas start moving faster than any single teacher could ever walk or ride to deliver them. 1763, Prussia makes school mandatory by law. 1870, England does the same. For the first time in the entire run of the species, a child sits in a classroom not because an elder chose to teach them something useful for staying alive, but because a government required their attendance. A child learning to skin an animal in total silence. A child in Nippur pressing symbols into wet clay before sunrise because an empire needs another scribe. A teenager walking into Plato's academy with no idea he is about to reshape how humanity organizes knowledge for the next 2,000 years. A girl in 19th century Prussia sitting at a desk for the first time in human history, not because her family wanted it, but because the state demanded it. 4 reasons: survival, bureaucracy, understanding, compliance. Every classroom on Earth right now is still running on some mixture of all 4, whether anyone teaching in it realizes it or not. For 300,000 years, learning was not a building. It was one person who knew something, standing next to one person who needed to know it, with nothing in between them. The classroom came second. The relationship came first. By a margin so large, it isn't really a competition. You sit in a room right now, waiting for a bell that tells you when you're allowed to stop listening. Nobody in the first 300,000 years of human existence ever needed a bell to tell them that. The fire that taught your ancestors everything they knew to stay alive is still burning somewhere underneath all of this. It just got moved indoors, put behind glass, and scheduled for 45 minutes between 10 o'clock and 10:45 on a Tuesday.